Hello, guys. Today I'm talking you through 5 Summit Strength rules, which are rules, principles, and guidelines in which I use to base my training and my business off. The intention behind this is just to share you a little bit of an insight around some underlying principles which I find incredibly valuable to the training process and also just to general life. Now, the idea behind this podcast was inspired by a bloke called Ben Settle, which I listened to one of his podcasts, in which he recurringly came on and talked about these rules that he had behind his business and his life and helped share some of the insights and wisdom behind that. And I thought this would be a really great thing to transition into the Summit Strength podcast or the Training for Trekking podcast to help talk about some underlying principles which I really firmly believe in. Now, I've got a whole bunch of these rules written up. I've probably got about 50 so far. So over the course of this podcast, every couple of weeks, I'll probably do an episode like this and just breaking down a number of different things around nutrition, around training, around hiking, around mental, around business, and a whole bunch of different things which I firmly believe in, which can hopefully give you a little bit of insight. So to kick things off, Summit Strength rule number 1 is, what would it look like if it was simple? Now, this quote and this principle comes from a business mentor of mine, a bloke called John Goodman. Basically, it's something that I very much believe in regards to my business, in regard to my training, and also into my everyday life. So how this sort of works is whenever you look at trying to do something new, whether you're trying to learn a new skill, whether you're trying to put together a training program, whether you're trying to decide what you need to do for your business, however you want to apply this into your life, is always, at first glance, looked a lot more complicated than it needs to be. You'll try to learn something, you'll try to apply it, and you'll go down this massive rabbit hole of information, find all these 101 different ways of going about it, and you can get really overwhelmed and confused, and in the end, just simply not doing anything. Now, when it comes to training for an adventure, specifically, this could be, you may have listened to 50 of these podcasts, and you may just be digesting information, sucking it in, but you might not actually be applying it. You might not know how to go about it. You might just be confused and overwhelmed. So whenever you get to that stage where you're just thinking about how can you get started with something, ask yourself, what would it look like if it was simple? So, for example, if you're trying to get into some hiking specific conditioning sessions and an article you read dives into discovering your heart rate zones, and first you got to get a heart rate monitor, then work out your maximum heart rate and this and that and this, and in the end you're feeling more overwhelmed than not, what would that look like if it was simple? Now, to me, it'll be simple if I just went out and did the workout and not worry about heart rate zones. That's absolutely 100% the simplest way of going about it. And that's how I recommend many of my clients. For me, when I was considering how I wanted to prescribe these particular types of workouts to my clients, whenever I look at heart rate zones, it just absolutely annoys me because I just have no interest in going down that technicality. So for me, for my clients, I give them a breathing prescription in the sense that if I want them going super high intensity, I tell them I want them huffed and puffed. If I want them going to lower intensity, I tell them they have to be able to breathe through their nose. That is so much simpler in my eyes than heart rate zones. And for me, that was really beneficial. So in any area of your training, your preparation, or anywhere else, it is going to be confusing, you are a bit overwhelmed, ask yourself, what would it look like if it was simple? And usually, 99% of the time, the simple answer is going to be so much more effective for you. So have a think about that. Now, Summit Strength rule number 2 is your training should fit around your life and not the other way around. Now, this is one that I've came up with and worded myself. There's probably a lot of people say something similar, but basically the intention behind this is quite often you will go online and you'll look at a pre-made training program and it'll ask you to do a certain amount of hours per week. And you might go, wow, how am I ever going to fit that in? And then if you follow people on social media, there's a lot of people who like to be very vocal around the fact that you just need to be disciplined about things. You just need to find the time to do it. You just need to force yourself to fit in an hour of training every day. And that's an attitude that I firmly do not believe in. I really think that you should be finding training and preparation and techniques and whatever you're doing that fits around your life and not having to cater around it. Because everyone's got stuff going on. We all have families. We all have work. Some of us will have young children to look after. Some of us will have stresses in our life and a million and one other things that come around. And just trying to force your life to fit around some really locked in stone training guidelines or having to do an hour of training every week or 3 hikes a week or anything like that. It's just not realistic. You might get away with it for a week or two, but long term, it's just not something that's going to work for you. So I personally believe any time that your life gets busy, anytime any roadblocks that come up in your life, you need to be flexible with your training. You need to think of ways that you can fit it around you. It might be just simply shortening the distance of hikes if you've got really, really busy time going on. Or I've had clients who've only been able to spare 20 minutes in a day. And instead of saying, hey, you have to do these 45-minute sessions, we've purely just broken it down into 20-minute sessions. Whatever situation this applies to, there's always a way which you can adapt your training to fit around what's going on in your life. And that's something I really, really believe in. Now, number 3, Summit Strength rule number 3 is hike your own hike unless you're training for an adventure. Now, hike your own hike, we've probably all heard it before, is a lovely old saying in the adventure community about basically saying it can go from, hey, go out and enjoy yourself and just have a good time, to mind your own business and stop sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, depending on the context of it. And I firmly believe in hike your own hike. If you're just living every day and you're just enjoying your hiking and just taking in the sunshine and that's the pure focus of your hiking, then absolutely hike your own hike. But if you are preparing for a significant adventure and you are training for something specific, hiking your own hike might not be the best way of going about things. Now, purely because we like to stick to things in which we're comfortable and which we're not put out of our comfort zone and we're not challenged. So this might be just doing the same hikes over and over. If you're looking at training during the week, this might simply be walking on the treadmill or doing things on the cross trainer or whatever you're generally comfortable with. But as a really, really general rule of thumb, usually when it comes to training, we're going to get quite amount of benefits out of the stuff that we're not entirely comfortable doing and stuff that we don't generally think of in the first time. Now, for me, when it comes to my preparations over the last 10 years or so, I absolutely love doing strength training. Like, that's a real enjoyment for me, and I have no problem fitting that into my training. And if I left to my own devices and I didn't actually think about things a little bit deeper, I would just say, look, I'm just going to do strength training 3 or 4 times a week, and then I might do 1 hike, and that'll get you ready for preparation. But if I think a little bit further, it's like, all right, if I'm honest with myself, I hate doing interval training and I hate doing hill intervals and I hate doing stair intervals. It just doesn't bring much enjoyment to me these days. So I know that that's going to give me a reasonable amount of benefit, and I know I need to do it in my prep. And it can go the other way. Some people might absolutely love doing stuff with their pack. They might love going out walking. They might love riding their bike, but they might just really, really be hesitant to start trying some strength training. And probably you're going to get some more benefits out of the stuff that you haven't really first thought about doing. So rule number 3, hike your own hike unless you're training for a significant adventure. Now, rule number 4, if your mind says you can't, ask your mind why. Now, I have no idea where I heard this from, but I think it's very, very, very applicable to anyone in the adventure community, particularly when we're planning adventures in itself. There's so many things that we think are sort of outside our capacity and outside our scope. Now, whether it might be some massive mountain you're dreaming, maybe it's just a genuine trek and you're worried about pain holding you back, or maybe it's an adventure you've always thought about and you just feel like you're getting on in age. Ask yourself, if you say, hey, I wouldn't mind doing that, and your mind says that you can't do that, that it's not possible, that it's just not practical to consider that, take a second and ask yourself, why is that? Really, really ask yourself and really, really dig into it. Because more than likely than not, it'll come up with a superficial reason, or you'll come up with a superficial reason saying, I'm too old, I've got a dodgy knee, I don't have the time, this and that. But if you really want to do something, more than likely, and in 99% of the situations, you will be able to do it if you put your mind to it, if you get the right support, if you take the right plan of attack. Now, this is inspired by a conversation I was having with my old man, probably about 8 months ago, 6 months ago now, when we were leading into going to Kokoda. And I was saying, look, I'm going to go to the Kokoda track, and I was telling my dad about it, and I was like, look, you should come. And my old man's probably 68 years old, and he's like, yeah, I've always dreamed of doing it, but I'm just too old, it's just not going to happen. And I was trying to convince him, I was like, look, if you did a bit of training, if you took a bit of preparation, went about the things that I do with hikers every single day, there's no doubt in my mind you could get ready for it. But he was just very, very, very adamant that he was too old and it just wasn't going to happen. So if you do find you've yourself got that roadblock in your head and you're like, you know what, I just can't do something, really, really take a moment to ask yourself why. And very, very potentially that reason might not really add up. And then the final rule I want to go over today is a little more practical and a little less abstract. And this applies to any type of hiking you're doing or any type of longer session. And it's basically always overestimate how much food you need. Now, this comes from personal experience where I absolutely hate being hungry on the trail. I hate it with a passion. If I'm hungry, I get grumpy, I get sick of hiking. So I always, always, always make sure I have way more food than I need. Sure, it might end up me carrying an extra kilo or two, but it keeps me so much happier. When it comes to your practical application on the trail, if you are getting hungry and you don't have enough food, you're not going to have the energy to perform at your best. You'll still be able to get through the hike, but you probably won't be performing at your best, and it's probably going to compromise your time on the trail and your enjoyment on the trail. So I always say, pack as much food as you think you need, and then add another half to it, because that is something that really, really I truly believe in, and I think people just generally don't eat enough on the trail as it is. So always overestimate how much food you need. So that is it from me today. That's the first 5 summit strength rules. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into how this segment is going to run over the long term. Hopefully you got a little bit of value out of some of them. Maybe some of those rules have resonated with you, or maybe you'll sort of come back to them in 2, 3, 4 months' time in a certain situation. But that stuff is stuff I really, really firmly believe in, and it really is an underlying principles around how I run my professional business, how I run my training, and how I live my life. So I do hope you get some value out of it. Now, as always with this, if you have enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love if you could either leave me a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, or share this to another hiker who might get some enjoyment out of this. But either way, hope you've enjoyed the episode, and we'll talk to you very soon.